All right, good afternoon. It's Mr. Reed coming at you live. Okay, so let's talk quickly about a couple things regarding today's lesson. The first thing I want to quickly talk about is what we've been doing with our Readers Workshop in terms of how I'm communicating with you guys. Um, just like how I explained in our last class about the chart there with the Readers Workshop. Um, the way I'm going to be communicating with you guys is I'm going to have you have the opportunity to read through your text of study and look for examples of concepts that we're studying in a particular class. And then the way I'm going to be reaching out to you is through just a quick check, right? So just like how we did it last class, we're going to be doing this for the next couple of classes. And what does that entail exactly? Well, usually I'm going to speak to each student for about a minute to 2 minutes, just kind of a quick check-in. And this is my chance to see your overall progress and how you are making sense and meaning of the concepts that we're covering in our day-to-day lesson. So today's going to be all about representation. And the way I'd like you to think about these conversations is that they literally are just sort of informal conversation. It's just a way to check to see how you're doing, if things are making sense to you. Please don't see it as a formal assessment, right? It's an opportunity for you to ask some questions, uh, the opportunity to show me some evidence, make your argument, and then also some claims about our text of study, okay? The next couple of slides here are just some showcase for you, student showcase about some of the responses that I saw from our last attendance work. Really fantastic responses, very thorough, very well thought out. So please take a moment just to check out some of these different responses from your classmates. All right, so representation. Let's talk a little bit about this concept that we're going to be dealing with today. Representation is the act of speaking on someone's behalf or depicting or portraying something in its absolute reality or complete detachment from it. Now, if you're thinking to yourself like, whoa, that's really complex, well, yeah, representation actually is a pretty complex concept. We're going to take it nice and slow today. We're going to take it relatively easy in terms of how we approach representation, but just understand that it's not a one-fit-all type of definition. Representation focuses on how things are conveyed with influence from the author's own opinions and cultural background, but also should be respected as being completely attached from those things as well, right? So an author will write, and they will represent ideas and characters and um, pieces within a text, like a conflict or maybe it's just the plot, based on their own knowledge and cultural assumptions. However, they don't necessarily need to do that, right? So it's our job to sort of figure out why a author will represent a person or a character or an idea the way they do. So here are three questions I'd like you to think about. Why and how are characters, ideas, places, and things represented in a certain way? Right? As you're reading through your story today, I just want you to consider this question. Another question here: to what effect are characters, ideas, places, and things represented in a certain way? And as an audience, how do we receive that? Right? Based on some of our own cultural assumptions, how do we receive information, how it's being represented to us? I can tell you that we all kind of come from different backgrounds, so maybe one person will read something in a particular way that another person may agree with or disagree with, right? So again, it's not a one definition or one answer fits all type of thing here. How does the author's or narrator's background influence how we see people, ideas, places, and things represented in the story, right? So that's going to be one of our main avenues today, is looking at how Lahiri represents her own characters and their own backgrounds and how that affects how they see people, ideas, places, and things represented in the story. Okay, so maybe at this point your head's a little like, what is going on? Okay, well that's fine. Okay, so let's just take a look at one example just to kind of help you break it down. So this comes from a little bit earlier on in the story. The text, as you see, Aaliyah is in a different country, a different color, my father said. Pakistan was yellow, not orange. I noticed that there were two distinct parts to it, one much larger than the other, separated by an expanse of Indian territory. It was as if California and Connecticut constituted a nation apart from the U.S., right? So, um, we've already talked a little bit about identity and how society in this story defines what the characters' identities are, right? They don't really have a lot of choice with that. Um, and being so, let's talk a little bit about how that pertains to this piece, right? So, historically speaking, partition created a divide between India and Pakistan, and eventually religious secularism resulted in the state of Bangladesh, right? Again, they were born into a Hindu family, or maybe they were born into a Muslim family. And because of that, there's now this not only just a religious difference, but it's also a nationality difference, right? Despite maybe the fact that people from Pakistan or what would become Bangladesh or India have similar cultural experiences, right? This is reinforced through the map that the father is demonstrating to Lilia, right? So the color coding here represents these historical and political religious divides on a symbolic level, right? So in a way, this map is kind of like a big symbol of the binaries or the divides between culture and identity and how they are being represented. Lilia's father further emphasizes this representation when he tells Lilia that it is different. So even just the language, the word different kind of is a punctuation or an emphasis on this difference or on this divide. Lahiri clearly wants her readers to recognize how history, politics, and religion and the history of colonialism has had a long-lasting effect on how people's ideas are represented in day-to-day things like a map or a globe, right? So it's the very small things in life that actually have a lot of symbolic meaning to them and how they are represented, what ideas are represented through those symbols, right? Here's another one, right? So we actually have two, this comes from the narrator's point of view, Lilia's point of view, and Lahiri clearly creates this divide. This is very much intentional because she wants us as an audience to consider the different ways that the livelihood of Bangladeshis in the United States is different, right? So she wants to challenge us as an audience to think about those differences. So there's a clear, stark contrast in the way these two countries and livelihoods are represented. One is represented as clean and safe, while the other is depicted with violence and chaos. Lilia sees these two worlds in very stark, absolute terms, which reveals how she was taught to see the issues of political turmoil and the American dream, right? Remember that she grew up in the United States, right? So the way she sees other, right, is through the depiction of within the media. And all the media really shows of the war in East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh, is political turmoil, right? And so that's kind of reflected in the second observation that she makes here, right? Whereas the first, which she grew up in, is pretty good, right, I would say. However, she does not recognize the colonial effects that have caused the violence and chaos. In turn, at least in the beginning of the story, these two passages reveal a colonial binary, right? So one is the colonizer, one was colonized, right? Not necessarily by the United States, but that's kind of beside the fact. Lahiri may have done this to show how children need to see diversity while they're growing up, rather than seeing images as absolute truths, right? Because again, all she sees is what she hears from Mr. Perzada and also what she sees on television, which can be dangerous to how we perceive the world around us. So, couple attendance questions that I would like you to go ahead and consider when you're going through today's text, which is Mr. Prasada. I'd like you to find two specific examples in Mr. Prasada, which starts on page 27 on the document, where the narrator or Lilia represents ideas, people, places, or things in a particular way. I'll ask you to provide page numbers, and I'd like you to go ahead and just pull examples directly from the text that I can see what you're working with. In addition to finding examples, I'd really like you to think about why these things are being represented the way they are and what effect that has on the character or us as an audience, right? So Lahiri does challenge her audience in a lot of ways through her representation of characters and ideas. So think about why she's doing that. If you are, all right, so there's a couple of you guys who were doing a temporary matter, which is fine. This whole unit is supposed to be designed so that you guys can explore and you can look at other text, other short stories. And in fact, I encourage you to read through as many as you can, right? Because there's some really good short stories here. But I just want you to realize that I am, because I had set out to do two short stories, I'm going to be doing Mr. Prasada, and then I'm also going to be doing Interpretive Maladies, okay? So some of you who are reading that, that's fine. Keep it up. Keep doing it. I encourage you to do that. Just please note that everything I'm going to be basing off of in terms of our conceptual understanding is going to be coming from Mr. Prasada in the Interpretive Maladies. Lastly, once you have read through the story, if you don't finish it today, that's fine. We're going to finish it up next class. I'd like you to go ahead and just kind of check out some other examples of text that deal with representation, all right? So I'm going to let you choose one of these, right? Feel free, obviously, watch as many as you want or read as much as you want, but for the attendance work, you only need to do one of these, all right? And here, I actually have a third option today from a Vox video. It's actually really good. So the attendance work is here. Feel free, again, to message me or through email. And today, again, I'm going to be checking in with you guys individually for about a minute to 2 minutes. Alrighty.